Boom.
Boom.
Lads, we're live. And I haven't had a guest on in a while. Mate, it's been a while since I've had any guest on, much less yourself. It's been a while. And yes, I am late, but I'm always late, lads. You know that by now. If I say it's going to be 10 past, set your alarms for a quarter past. Because, I'm like a woman in that sense, fashionably late, even though I'm not looking too fashionably now with the big beard. But we're live nonetheless. I've got a guest, Joe Stunner Boxing, with me, and I have the link to his channel there because Joe is about to hit a milestone of 2K. I remember I hit that. I think it was 2020 is when I hit 2K, and it was a nice feeling. And once you hit 1,000, you notice your channel starts to it gets a little bit easier and a bit easier. We want to get him to 2K. So Joe Stunner Boxing, 2K subs. Hopefully by the end of this, I'll let you fill us in on your channel. Most people would have seen you here a few times, but we've grown a lot the last couple of weeks. So there's a lot of new fans, a lot of new subscribers.
Well, it's just does what it says on the tin. Joe Stunner Boxing. I just do videos about all things boxing, previews, the political issues, failed PED tests, all this sort of jazz. And then I originally just started the channel because I was off work a couple of years ago. The channel will be two years old in October. So I was off work and I was in quite a bit of physical pain, and I thought, I've got to take my mind off it, So I started the channel, and it sort of grew, and with your help and the help of a few others, but especially you, it grew, it's nice. But subscribe, watch the videos, leave your comments, and I'll answer them.
Obviously, we're talking about Dubois versus Usyk in this, and that is primarily what we're going to be talking about because I see certain people going back and forth saying it'll be a very competitive fight. Some people disagree. But before we do anything, there is some news that's broke in the last hour, and I know for a fact Joe Stunner doesn't know about it, so I'm going to break it to him. My old pal, the picture of health that he is, Dan Raphael, broke this news. Elisa Baumgardner reportedly has tested positive for metrolona, I think is how you pronounce that, in a drug-free sport drug test prior to being the interesting word, to her last fight versus Christina Litteradu last month. Results came back after the fight. Apparently, it's multiple sort of things were found in these drug tests. Another one bites the dust. And I can't say I'm surprised with Elisa Baumgardner because she has bulked up massively over the last year and a half. And that did look a little bit suspect, so I can't say I'm surprised. But another one?
Yeah, it's never ending, isn't it? I mean, the only good thing, this is the first I've heard of this. And you're right, she is a big, bulky-looking girl, isn't she? But the one good thing, I suppose, if you're trying to look for positives, is that at least people are getting busted. And I'm sure there are a lot that aren't, because I'm sure it's rife throughout the whole sport. But as long as they keep catching people, and the next stage is to give them, sensible bans. I'm not someone who goes down the ban them for life. I mean, each case should be taken on its own merits, but they've got to, they're found guilty.
Repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders.
Miller
someone like Jamel Miller, kick him out of the sport. I got no problem with that. But first offenders, all right, you get 3 years.
Only 3 years.
Well, 5. I don't know. I don't know who's going to be the sort of moral arbiter. That's the question. But what we don't want is, well, you get a year, because some fighters don't fight in a year, or they might fight once, and I will backdate it 6 months. And no, that's not doing anyone any good. You catch them, you got to punish them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't entirely surprise me with her because she's a big girl, isn't she?
It's weird that it's not VADA though, because it seems like forgive my ignorance, but I've never heard of drug-free sport drug testing. It must be about a drug testing agency that is kind of under the radar, because we're familiar with the VADAs, the WADAs of the world, the UCADs in the UK, and I would imagine that each state maybe has I can imagine. I don't remember what state that fight was in. It might have been Detroit. Maybe they have their own independent body, and they just maybe are called drug-free because obviously a lot of other commissions in different countries would have different names. Maybe that's what it is. But I've never heard of them.
I've heard of them. I think I read about them in Boxing News. But I don't know much about them. I lose track because there's so many different drug testing agencies and who does what and who represents what and who's got the power to do which thing. And I just lose track. But I think Matchroom have I've got something to do with them. I think they've signed up with them. But,
interesting. Because honestly, I've never heard of them. But when I heard it, I was like, "Who the hell are these?" I was expecting it to be a Vada or someone like that.
Yeah.
And there was voluntary. Matchroom have released a statement on it, and I'll just read the statement here. We will go and talk about Dubois versus Usyk, but this is breaking news, and I just want to just have a little 5-minute discussion, and I'll just read the statement Matchroom have said. Matchroom have confirmed that Elisa Baumgardner returned an adverse analytical finding. That's exactly the terminology that was used with Dylan White, as part of an anti-doping protocol instituted voluntarily for her July 15 bout in Detroit. That was right. Matchroom was first informed of this on the 12th of August. The application regulatory authorities are also aware we defer to such bodies for further investigation and guidelines, and a full investigation will be conducted. Matchroom is committed to promoting a clean and fair sport for all athletes. Will assist Elisa and her team during this time, affording her the opportunity, or affording her the appropriate due process. That's the statement there. Conducted on July 15th. Matchroom are saying they were only informed on the 12th. That's not good enough for a drug testing agency to only be informing the promoters nearly a month later, if that in fact is true.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know the politics or the procedure or the protocol, but yeah, that's nearly a month. That's kind of ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be interesting to see what Matchroom do, because as with Conor Benn, they plugged a lot of money into Ben when they signed him from his debut onwards, and they plugged some money into Baumgardner as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what tactics they take, whether they've learned anything from the Conor Benn debacle.
Baumgardner really kind of was. Some of us would have knew who she was, but she kind of came in as the opponent originally for Matchroom, if you remember, when she fought Terry Harper in Sheffield, which was a fantastic performance. And that's nearly 2 years ago. And Baumgardner she's headlined a lot of cards now over there for Matchroom, so she's really gaining traction over there as well. So again, like, I'm not to linger on too much about this, but she has you can noticeably see it. The muscles increased over the last few years, and it's disappointing because as a person, I really like Elisa Baumgardner. She seems a really, really nice, really good, down to earth person. So let's wait and see what happens with this.
I think, first of all, Michaela Mayer is going to be laughing at.
Oh, she is going to.
She's going to love this.
But she's already a very Marmite character as it is, to say the least.
But I think, yeah, exactly. But also, she's failed this test, Baumgardner. So surely this fight at the very least should be changed to a no contest. I don't understand why they don't do that with people who are caught.
It's funny you say that, because if you look at some of fight cards over the years, BoxRec would list it as a no contest, and other places would list it as a regular fight. Like a good example would be Guillermo Jones when he fought Lebedev. It took years after the fact for that fight to actually go along the board as a no contest.
Yeah, and Lebedev took it's one of the worst eye injuries I've ever seen.
Tremendous fight, but a horrible,
horrendous injury.
Horrendous injury. But that is the situation with that. Now, that was just because I knew you didn't know when I said it to you backstage. I was like, I got to talk about this. I got to get there. I got to talk about this.
No, another one.
Video incoming after this from Joe Stunner, straight up. Video incoming. But the main talking point we got to talk about, right? We're literally less than a fortnight away from Daniel Dubois versus Oleksandr Usyk. It is a fight that's kind of crept up on us. I think it's a good fight, but it's not the fight we want for Oleksandr Usyk. We obviously want Oleksandr Usyk versus Tyson Fury, in spite of what Frank Warren says, and it seems every other week it's more absolute waffle coming out of his mouth. Now he's saying Fury signed for it originally, which we know is a complete lie, and we can say that because he definitely didn't. That's the fight we want, but this is the fight we're getting. What are your thoughts on it? Now, I personally don't give Dubois a snowball's chance in hell, but it might be too harsh. And Hatman spoke about boxing fans, especially with the heavyweight division, having a bit of amnesia. I think that's not how he described it, but he said that it swings in roundabouts, heavyweight boxing, and upsets happen when you least expect it, and not to underestimate youth. Am I underestimating this youth, or am I right?
Hatman, I might be wrong about this. I think he's maybe a little bit younger than me, or roughly my age. So he will remember Mike Tyson against Buster Douglas, which I most certainly do. And that was so shocking that literally when I woke up the following day, I thought I might have dreamt it. I'm serious. I mean, I it was so unbelievable. It's so surreal watching Tyson on the floor, because it's hard to sort of explain to younger fans exactly how invincible Tyson seemed at the time. And for him to get knocked out by Buster Douglas, who essentially quit against Tony Tucker.
Tony Tucker, yeah, quit in the 10th round.
So I swore after that, never again will I underestimate anyone at any weight in a boxing ring. Nothing will surprise me. So I'm kind of, I think I watched Hatman's video on this, and he was talking about youth and youth being served and so on. I wouldn't rule out Dubois entirely. I give him sort of 25% chance, which 1 in 4 is not bad, is it? But I'd make him a rank underdog. But I think for a guy of that size who hits that hard, who's physically very strong, and he is only 25, which is very young for a heavyweight. Stranger things have happened. I make Usyk an absolute favourite, and I expect him to win. But if he landed a Hail Mary punch and put Usyk on the floor, and Usyk got up and was wobbly and the ref stopped it, is that too far a scenario? I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, he was talking about the fact that he actually expects Dubois to do better than Joshua did. Now, Dubois is more... Joshua lately has been boxing a lot. The boxer. And against Usyk, that didn't work, evidently, both times. Dubois isn't so much a boxer. He's more a kind of seek and destroy, which on paper should actually help him against Usyk, because it's not going to be a pure boxing match. But you're only as good as your last fight. He did fight a blown-up cruiserweight in his last fight. Granted, nowhere near as good as Usyk, but we saw the problems that happened in that first round. And you think if that's Usyk, that's going to be exacerbated. Do you think, judging by now, the fact that he was able to come through it is a good thing? Do you think he'll take that fight against Lorena and say, well, it was a crisis, but I came through it? Or do you think that that's going to be in his mind going in there against a similar style, although a much better fighter?
Well, I think it takes the pressure off him, because I'm reminded of another big upset which involved Mike Tyson, which was the first Holyfield fight. And going into that, Holyfield was coming off the back of probably his worst ever performance against Bobby Ches. He looked absolutely awful. He looked shot. Yeah. And then he ended up stopping Tyson. And Tyson was past his best, but it's still an incredible upset and a fantastic performance. So the pressure is off Dubois as far as, okay, you know, he had a lousy... I mean, I thought that was shocking, the Lorena fight. That shocked me more than the Joyce fight, where Joyce is a big, strong lump, and Lorena isn't, and Lorena nearly knocked him out in the first round. But he did have an injury as well. I think the thing is, you know, you mentioned he might do better than Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's lost his way psychologically. His psyche is fractured. He doesn't really know what he is, who he is, what he's doing, what type of style he's got, who am I going to work with, what am I going to do? You know, he second-guessed himself totally. It's his problems, as far as I can see, are mental. And Dubois, during the build-up, when I've seen him interviewed, I know he's not the most charismatic of guys. He's quite shy,
to say the least.
Yeah, but he's, you know, he seems genuinely quite confident. Now, okay, the lights can go on in Poland, and everyone's screaming for his blood, and everyone, you know, Poland is on the border of Ukraine, so loads of the Ukraine people come over to watch it, and it's going to be a cauldron, and he could freeze. But if he doesn't, if he genuinely has that mental strength. And, you know, people say, he quit against Joyce. He did. But, you know, he was in that fight. He wasn't doing
bad. He wasn't getting battered.
You know, it wasn't like he rolled over in the first 2 or 3 rounds. So I think, I do agree that he'll do better than a lot of people think. Whether he'll do better than Joshua or not, I think you're right about the fact that he is a come forward banger. He's a slugger. Well, not a slugger. He's a pressure fighter. Because I always thought it would be interesting if Joshua hadn't lost to Ruiz and was unbeaten when he went in against Usyk, that killer instinct, would he have boxed like the old AJ Moore? You know what I mean? Against Usyk, and in other words, gone after him. And I think that would have been more interesting. Maybe we'll see that with Dubois when he takes on Usyk.
I think it will. It's something you touched on there that has me kind of thinking about things about that. So this fight, obviously, we know is in Poland, and Dubois is very much the heel in this, for want of a better word. He won't be getting cheered. This is Oleksandr Usyk's show. Dubois, throughout his whole career, has been the home fighter. He's always had the crowd on his side. Against Joe Joyce, we didn't really see any pressure in terms of having a big audience because there was no fans at that. That was behind closed doors. How do you think someone of Dubois, who was he doesn't give much away, he doesn't show much emotion, he's a very reserved individual. How would he feel, do you think, going into the Lions Den? And he will have a sea of boos, I don't doubt that. For a guy at 25 who, look, this is known, he still lives at home. He's a millionaire, but he still lives at home. He's really been a sheltered individual throughout his whole life. That's got to be strange, or it will be, I would imagine, strange to the psyche of someone like that to go into the Lions Den and be just jeered out of the building. I wonder how that's going to impact on him. We won't know until fight night, but I wonder how that's going to be.
As I say, he could freeze. It's possible he could freeze. But I think there's one thing. There's one thing that no one's been talking about, or people haven't really been talking about. And when they do mention it, they're kind of disparaging about Don Charles. Now,
yeah, me myself.
I mean, I don't think he's the greatest trainer in the world. But I'll tell you one thing, right? Don Charles, I've only met him once. And actually, I was queuing up to go into the York Hall, and he happened to pass by, and I said, "Oh, hello, Don," and blah, blah, blah. And we got talking for 5-10 minutes about boxers, and instantly the passion of the man comes through.
Really?
Now, he did an interview with October Red on her channel, and he became quite emotional. He started crying because the way she phrased questions was, quite moving. And he seems like a guy who's a real stand-up guy. He loves his fighters. He wants to look after them, and he wants them to be good people as well as make millions of pounds and be world champs. And the thing about passion and enthusiasm is that confidence can come from it. And if he's been around Daniel and saying the right, and Daniel strikes me as the sort of guy who needs an arm around the shoulder, metaphorically speaking.
Definitely.
If Don Charles is having that effect on him emotionally, maybe when he gets there, he'll think, I only need Don Charles, as long as Don's in my corner. Even if Usyk's beating him up for a couple of rounds, he might look over. When he gets back to the corner, he knows he's got this guy who he can really connect with emotionally. And this really is what Joshua needs. I'm digressing on the Joshua again, but I think that the Don Charles might be the man for Dubois in the corner, and I think that might have a very positive effect.
That's interesting you say that, because you made me think there, because when I look at Dubois' past two trainers, very good trainers in Mark Tibbs and Shane McGuigan, they are extremely busy with active world level fighters. Mark Tibbs was training Billy Joe Saunders at the time. He Johnny Fisher, he Bridges. He didn't have Dylan White at the time, but he'd loads of top level fighters, and a la Shane McGuigan. So could they really be in a situation where they could shoulder around Dubois? I'll take you to one side. I'll make sure we're working together. When they have all that around them, McGuigan's Ellie Scottney amongst others. He can't really probably do that with his fighters. Whereas Don Charles doesn't have a massive stable of fighters to work with. So when someone like Dubois works,
there's an emotional investment. It's like when Don's success has come through Derek Chisora, who I think what he win British Commonwealth and European.
British Commonwealth European. And he had the great night with Buglioni as well. He was very emotional that night.
That's right. Yeah. I always remember his reaction when Derek knocked out Taka. He was losing for the whole fight, and he had that almighty right hand. And Don, when he stopped him, Don went to his knees, arms in the air. Oh my God! He's that type of character. But some fighters, particularly ones who are a little bit introspective and looking inwards, they need someone to sort of get inside their head and say, look, you can do this. You've got all these attributes, and there's a lot to be said for that. I think it's quite an underrated. But your point about some trainers being really busy, spreading themselves too thin, that's absolutely true.
Oh yeah, it has to be.
And trainers are essential. Well, I've made several videos recently talking about this subject, and you've got to. It takes you 2 years with a new trainer, not just because what you're learning technically has to become second nature, which requires a hell of a lot of repetition, but to get to know each other, to know each other's sort of little foibles and idiosyncrasies and what you mean. Sometimes, the best trainer in the fight, they don't have to say anything to each other. They kind of know. You know what I mean? They you might say one sentence, and they can read body language and stuff like that. I mean, this is all getting a bit into the intangibles of the.
We like the intangibles.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I'm eager to see the fight, and I do agree with you. And the Hatterman was it who said he's going to do better than people are saying. I don't think it'll be a knockover job.
I expect Oleksandr Usyk to win. I'll put it like that. And I have to go by what I seen against a similar style, nowhere near as good, and obviously he's similar-ish in Kevin Lerena. And based upon that, I struggle to see how Dubois gets out of the first half of this fight. Just based upon that fight, I struggle to see it. That's not to say it can happen. Look, this is only my opinion. That's not the. I thought Joshua would get rid of Helenius in a couple of rounds. He didn't. It went 7 rounds. So just because you think something will happen doesn't mean it will. But I don't know. Maybe because I've been around boxing long enough, but not to the level of you and Hatman. I've seen upsets, but not on the level of that Tyson. So I don't have that dramatic, earth-shattering upset to kind of go back on.
Well, I mean, Lerena, yeah, he's a cruiser, posing as a heavyweight. I think Usyk is a heavyweight now.
Definitely.
I mean, he's a big man. You look at him I know he's going to be smaller than your Joshuas and your Dubois, but he's not a small man. He's a very big man, and he doesn't try to knock you out with one punch. He'll soften you up and bewilder you and break your heart and take your soul away or whatever. And then he might knock you out, like he did with Bellew, for example.
With Bellew, people always say how competitive Bellew was. And Bellew in the corner was like, I'm tired just trying to keep up with this guy. It's taking all your strength. And I think that's the thing. Even if you're having success against Usyk, it's taking all of your strength. It took Bellew his whole strength to keep up with Usyk. And when Usyk went into overdrive, it was over. I think that's something that people don't talk enough about, is that even for fighters, and I'm sure Joshua felt it as well in there, like just to keep up with this guy, it must have been absolute mentally just draining.
Well, Joshua nearly got knocked out in the last round of the first fight.
If it
had to be in the 13th round, he wouldn't come out for it. He was absolutely shattered. And I'm convinced a lot of that is mental stress. But as far as Usyk's concerned, he has got all these gears he can go through. You saw that in the second fight with Joshua when he had problems in the 10th, and then in the 11th he just went through the gears and put it on AJ and battered him.
And I think from a mental point of view, that's got to be horrific, just to go through. You had your success, and then what the hell's happening? What the hell?
Where did this guy come from?
It's like, what the.
And also, if you look at the end of, look at any Usyk fight, or certainly most of them, 12 rounders I'm talking here. At the end of it, he looks fine. He might be sweating a bit, but he looks like he could do another 5-10 rounds.
Tremendous conditioner.
Yeah, and his mental strength is just immense. Absolutely immense.
It's a fight that we're all looking forward to. There's a few decent fights on the undercard now. Hamza Shearis is meant to be on there. I can't help but feel that I am selling it short, but maybe it's an ego thing. I think I'll be proven right. What's Joe Stunner's thought on it? If gun to your head, do you see a stoppage or points, and do you think that when it's all said and done, we'll be saying he lost, but he did better than Joshua?
I see a stoppage.
Really?
Probably between the 8th and the 10th. But yeah, I do think we'll be saying, Dubois didn't do too bad. And I don't. His kid's 25 years old, for Christ's sake. Getting stopped by Oleksandr Usyk, or if he was to go the distance, that is a moral victory. But even if he's to get stopped in the 10th or whatever, I mean, he's 25 years old. You learn from your mistakes. I hate this cult of, the undefeated fighter, because in the old days, I think I said this before when I was on your show, in the old days, you go back 60, 70 years, if you had an undefeated record, people would laugh at you. They'd say, well, you haven't fought anyone, have you?
Yeah.
You beat everyone? Well, you couldn't be fighting anyone. Even Ray Robinson in his first 90 fights or whatever it was had a loss to Jake LaMotta.
Yeah.
And of course, he avenged it several times.
Several times.
Yeah, exactly. What was it, 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 5 or something?
5 out of 6, I think.
Yeah, 5 out of 6. But so all this business about, he lost. So what? So, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's like the interesting thing. I'll tell you what, something popped into my head a moment ago about you were saying about Bellew and when he fought Usyk, and he was kind of the mental strength of Usyk was grinding him down. That I think will play a part in this fight, definitely. I don't know if you saw the Valdez Navarrete fight.
Yes, it was an excellent fight.
A brilliant fight. Now I was giving Valdez rounds But at the same time, I thought Navarrete was winning the fight. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was kind of like, okay, he's won that round, but he had to do absolutely everything in his power to win a round, whereas Navarrete would sort of go to sleep for a round and then would suddenly explode. I think we could see something like that. You know, Dubois might win a few rounds along the way because Usyk is, you know, pacing himself or taking a round off or whatever. And then suddenly, like as I said before, you know, like in the late rounds against Joshua, he'll go through the gears, and then I think he'll stop Dubois. But it won't be 2 or 3 rounds, I don't think.
No, I expect a stoppage as well. Will I be saying he did better than Joshua by the end? Well, I'll be doing a watch along, so you'll have to. I'll say it at the end of that. But in terms of a loss, as you said, he's only 25. A loss to Oleksandr Usyk or to Tyson, like. People were like, "Oh, Joshua's lost twice to Usyk." It's like, so Usyk is arguably the best heavyweight in the division right now, and arguably the best of this era.
Right.
But no shame in that. As if you should look at that and say, "Well, that's shameful. You lost to him." It's like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
It's bizarre. This whole
he
notion of
24 rounds with Usyk. How many heavyweights go 24 rounds with Usyk?
Not many, if any. And most of them would probably won. He won his fair share of rounds. He definitely had successes in it. So it baffles me when it's a very. I do think it's starting to die out a bit. This whole notion of, oh, if you lose, you're garbage. We're not seeing it as much, but there is still that lingering. It lingers on to some extent. It's lesser than it was, say, 7-8 years ago, post Mayweather. It's going, but it's not fully gone yet.
Yeah. I mean, if you take Joe Calzaghe retired undefeated and Carl Froch had 2 defeats on his record, who's got the better resume? I would say Froch. Mm-hmm. You know, and now, strangely enough, I would pick Calzaghe prime for prime. I'd pick Calzaghe.
Hell yeah, every day.
But if you fight the absolute best all the time, you're going to pick up a couple of losses or some draws on your record or whatever. So what? Who cares? You know,
it means that you've actually tried. Joshua had said it himself in one of his videos. Joshua tried to unify. He tried to fight the best. He wasn't good enough. So what? He tried. Fury is saying he's the best without actually proving it. And yes, I'm bringing him up again because it's just makes it so easy.
Well, you should.
It.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Fury might well retire undefeated. I'm hoping that history will judge him as, you know, a man who had a lot of talent, but didn't really maximize it because was
it you? Because I remember someone, and I can't remember who it was. It might have been in a live. It might have been, maybe it was on the Element Group. I can't remember who it was, but someone said to me, and it stuck with me, that in their opinion, in 10, 15 years from now, they will remember, or Fury will be remembered if he does retire without fighting Usyk and Joshua, as one of the biggest fraudulent champions of all time. Not to say that he wasn't good, but having a resume of, you know, undefeated, retired as champion, but without ever attempting to unify, without ever attempting to fight the best contenders available at the time, without ever doing that. Someone said that, and I was thinking, do you know what? That probably could well happen.
Well, he'll be judged for avoiding Usyk, but I don't think we can take away the victory in Germany. Dusseldorf victory was excellent, and also the trilogy with Wilder. Even though he outweighed Wilder by something in terms of natural weight by about 40 pounds, which is just under 3 stone. He is an extremely talented fighter, but I don't think people will. Let's put it this way: if he fought Usyk and lost on points, people would remember him more favourably than the fact that he's avoided Usyk and has taken on Ngannou and maximising his earning potential without fighting anyone. They'll remember him more favourably. They'll say, well, you know, so what? Usyk was brilliant. But Fury is a guy who's not scared of opponents. He's scared of losing. He wants that zero. He's bought into this cult of zero because of, you know, Floyd Mayweather or whatever.
I don't. For me, I always look at it and I'm like, I don't understand it. He's obviously seen what's happened when Joshua's lost and how a lot of fans have just gone, which they have. A lot of them, after he lost to Ruiz, they were like, well, what's the point in sticking around? You know, he's lost. But Fury, I maintain that I think he's near the end of his career. He may be in the twilight. So why not? Like, if you lose to Usyk, you're probably not going to stick around much longer anyway. And if you beat him, happy days. But if you lose, it's not going to be like Joshua, where he's smack bang in the middle of his career. He's trying to rebuild. He's trying to get his fans back in it. You're just looking at, like, well, you're near the end. So does it really, obviously for legacy, you want to be undefeated, but does it matter in the grand scheme? Your drawing power isn't going to be diminished that much, especially if you retire not long after.
Well, if he fought Usyk and lost, and he could have had a rematch maybe, or if he lost conclusively and there was no demand for a rematch, he could have fought Ngannou. And I don't know. I mean, I just think the guy's wasted a lot of his talent by not taking on the best, and it's disappointing because, I mean, if you watch, you know, videos that I made from a couple of years ago, I was singing the guy's praises. You know, I don't want to dislike the guy, but I do. So
he makes it very easy.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna. I mean, I do the same with Joshua. I'm not. I don't believe in, you know, the cult of personality. I just think I'm just a boxing fan. I want to see the best fight the best, and if the right guy wins, as long as there's no bad decisions, respect to both of them. I don't mind. I don't know any of these guys, so why would I have anything against them?
And that's exactly it. And I think, like, when I speak about Fury as a boxer, it's like Tony Bellew. You know, as a person, I don't particularly like Tony Bellew at all. It's easy to say. But as a boxer, tremendous fighter in the ring. I mean, he was a warrior. He was an absolute blood and guts warrior, an overachiever. Tremendous. I always enjoyed watching him. As a person, leaves a lot to be desired. Fury, as a boxer, he is one of the best you could watch. I mean, a man of his size to move like that and the skill on display, he's tremendous. That's why it's so frustrating. You want to see a man as good as him in there against the Usyks, the Joshuas, the Sanchez's of the world. Just say, right, let's see how good you are.
And I think also, if he'd been honest and he'd said, I did a video yesterday about this very subject. If he'd said, look, do you know what? I'm not in the mood for Usyk. I'll fight him a little bit down the line, but I've got this chance to fight this guy Ngannou to make a ton of money, and I'm a businessman, so I'm going to go. If he'd been honest about it, I mean, some people would have said, you know, they'd have been disappointed and they'd have probably slagged him off, but he wouldn't have lost fans in the droves that he has done, and he wouldn't have come across as being a liar. Honesty takes you a long way with the public, and certainly as far as history is concerned. People will say, well, you know, he made a controversial decision, but at least he was honest about it.
I think for me, it's like his fans who were there, a lot of them have come off that bandwagon now after everything that's happened. The way he's handled it, where it's almost like, I say it like, and it's a saying, you've insulted your fans' intelligence to some extent. And once you do that, there's no coming back. Because his fans are looking at this, the ones who really understand that, you know, you have these clowns who are like, no, everyone's out to get him and everything Warren says is true. Everything Warren says is true. It says a queue of fighters like who want to get a Frank Warren for many, many years, not just recent. And they'll tell you, nah, Warren, I'd sooner trust, God knows, I'd sooner trust a magician to tell me his magic is real than I would tell Warren, tell me the truth.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, Frank Warren's been around for 40 years. I can sort of remember him coming through vaguely, breaking up the cartel. Mickey Duff, Jobs, Mike Barrett, and Terry Lawless. They controlled everything, and he came along, and he was, you know, we were all kind of, a lot of boxing fans who were a little bit older than me. I remember them sort of cheering him on. Yeah, break up the cartel. Let's get terrestrial boxing on terrestrial telly and live on telly and all. It was revolutionary because it was prior to satellite, you know, Sky.
The ITVs and the BBCs.
Yeah. And I remember, you know, Frank Warren having some very good domestic shows. I can't remember, it was called Tuesday Night Fights or Wednesday Night Fights or something on ITV. That was really good. But of course, you become what you once detested. And I think Eddie Hearn has sort of got one foot in both camps at the moment. Because when he came on the scene, it was a breath of fresh air, and he had that fantastic success with Sky. But then, you know, it kind of makes you a bit bitter the older you get. The grey hair starts to appear, and you start to get a bit resentful and all the rest of it.
You become the thing you fight.
Yeah. And at the moment, it's, you know, I know he gets a lot of flack, but, you know, Ben Shalom came along with Sky, and he's trying his thing. And
Ben Shalom is someone who is he's like, imagine this is what I like a Ben Shalom too, right? Imagine Warren and Hearn, right? Their worst traits, but none of their qualities rolled into one. You get Ben Shalom. That's literally it. It's like you get none of their good traits, but you just get the bad ones. You roll it into one, and you get Ben Shalom. There you go.
Well, he's yeah, was it Frank Smith said, he hasn't got a clue what he's doing. He hasn't got, he comes across that way. I mean, he got that gig because Hearn obviously moved away from Sky, but prior to that, I think I'm right in saying Ben Shalom had done a few of those sort of prize fighter knockoffs.
Yeah. They're basically the prize fighter tournaments just rebranded.
Yeah. And that was it. And then suddenly this Sky gig landed in his lap, and he was like, "Whoa, Christmas has come early. I won the lottery here." And then he went around spending a ton of money on. I mean, really, all that money for Lawrence Okoli. And those two fights at Sky have been awful, just terrible performances.
The only logical thing I can think about with Okoli is he probably he approached him after the Glowacki fight and the Cieslak fight, which was not the most entertaining, but it had entertaining parts in it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing he was probably looking at that thinking, okay, he's more entertaining now than he was years ago. I'm getting an entertaining fighter I can build around him. Boy, did that not work out well.
Well, he looked entertaining when he was with McGuigan, who was kind of bringing out the best qualities in him. Now he's with Sugar Hill. Again, it takes time to gel with a trainer, and it may be the wrong trainer. You don't know whether it's the right trainer until you've had a few fights with them. But it's not working out for Ben Shalom. How old is Ben Shalom? He's about 29, 30, isn't he?
I think he's a year younger than me, so he'd be about 28, 29. So I think he's 94 and I'm 93.
Yeah.
Well, in the years, I think he's 94 and I'm 93, so about a year thereabouts.
Yeah. Well, but if he carries on the way he's going on, he'll look 94 and all, because he's making some pretty bad, embarrassing decisions.
How old was Hearn? Like, I know obviously with Hearn, he had Barry, who obviously was with Matchroom and Sky, and obviously he worked with Sky before. So, but Eddie was well in his 30s by the time he got that gig. Ben Shalom's in his mid 20s. That is strange.
Yeah, he's probably, what was he, 32, 33 maybe, I think.
32, 33, thereabouts, early to mid 30s. But you would imagine that he would have been old enough, whereas Ben Shalom in his mid to late 20s is like, okay, with no real experience on that. It's like,
well, Hearn had his father to go to, because his father was back in the day. He was a contemporary of Warren's, and I remember the first fight he put on was Joe Bugner against Frank Bruno at White Hart Lane, 87, I want to say. And that he just threw money at the game and didn't really know. He said, didn't really know what I was doing, but of course he learned, and then he taught Eddie. Eddie, I think originally or prior to when he hooked up with Audley Harrison, that was his first big fighter anyway. Big name. He was I think he was into sort of sports management. I think he dealt with golfers or something like that. So he had to learn on the job as well, but. So Shalom has got, he's young enough to turn it round, but at the moment he's spending money, like hemorrhaging money, and on Buatsi, his performance was pretty lousy and flat. And
what I don't really like about Ben Shalom that's being a parent, right? Like Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, they've all been victim of this, but never this soon and this on this level is. Ben Shalom seems to be, I just want it in-house. If it's not in-house, I don't want to know. Now, all promoters are victim of that. But, like, Eddie Hearn, even for big fights, has been like, okay, if they have to go on another platform, they will. Frank Warren, likewise, he's had some of his guys way back in the day. Like, I remember Bradley Skeet fought Sam Egerton on Sky. He was a Queensbury fighter at the time. Whereas Ben Shalom, it's like, if it's any other network or anything like that, or if I risk losing it, I just don't want to do it.
Well, it's public perception as well, because he started off by saying we'll work with any promoter. So okay, we'll hold you to that. And then the moment a purse bid comes up, oh no, we're pulling our man out. Well, why did you let it get to that point in the first place, where it is a purse bid? Why didn't you sort of say, well, actually, thank you for the offer of the purse bid, but actually we're going in this direction, and no one would have said anything. And it can't do the fighters any good. Like Fraser Clark, you know, had a chance to fight for the British title, and instead he's fighting a washed up Marius Vac at the York Hall. It's not.
And now he's fighting Dave Allen, which for me is just like, what the hell? Someone in the watch along I did the other night said that one of their friends, who's a heavyweight, actually has been getting the better of Dave Allen in sparring, which is a worry for Dave Allen going into a fight against Fraser Clark when you've already taken a fair few shellackings in your career.
Yeah, he's taken a lot of punishment. A lot. I mean, it's not quite as much as Derek Chisora, of course. That's another conversation. But
that actually is interesting. You say Chisora, because Chisora's more losses. He's been around longer. But I would make the argument seriously that Dave Allen has had worse punishment, because the losses he's had, Chisora's always been game at his losses. Yeah, he's taken a few beatings, but he's always given as good as he's got, and he's been laid out, a few times against Dylan White and David Hay, and Tyson Fury hit him until the cows came home. But when you look at the way the beatings, the long, sustained, drawn out, horrendous beatings Dave Allen has taken, you'd argue, and then sparring as well, you'd argue that maybe he's worse for the wear even than Chisora is. Bear in mind, he's about a decade younger.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if you look at Dave Allen's bad beatings, we're talking Yoka, Ortiz, David Price, and then you got the sparring stories.
Usyk.
But then you see, I think, okay, if Dave Allen stopped now, he might be okay-ish. With someone like Chisora, because of the age he is and the fact that your brains don't regenerate. I mean, I think he's gone past the point of no return. I think if he stopped tomorrow and called it a day, he'll still suffer later on in life.
I hope you're wrong in that sense, because I don't want to see it. I really don't.
Yeah, and people say, but you can't tell a boxer to retire. No, you can't. You know, they're grown men, they've got mental capacity. But at the same time, if you care about fighters as human beings, you kind of want to encourage them to quit, don't you? I mean,
I'm sure Eddie Hearn, because I think it was you who said it, would happily offer Derek Chisora an advisory deal or something like that in Matchroom to support him. I'm sure he'd happily do that.
Yeah, it wasn't me. It was
Chris Andre.
Yeah, and I thought it's a good idea. I saw Chris's video, and I thought, that's not a bad idea. Whether Derek can let go or not, I don't know. He just likes fighting, doesn't he? Maybe if they'll say, well, we'll put him in against a domestic level fighter, but you're still taking headshots. You're still going through camp.
You're still taking hits and sparring as well in camp. God knows how many rounds you do in training. And God, those head guards, I'm convinced the newer head guards, how soft they are worse than old ones, because these new head guards that are soft, they have a shocking sensation in them. And I've always wondered, because I've used them, they're too soft. They're too soft, and they have a jolty kind of feel to them. And I always said, like, these modern head guards, I don't know if they're actually safer or not. I've always kind of been on the fence about them.
Well, in my day, the head guards were to predominantly protect you from like cut eyes or swellings. It's the movement of the head that creates the brain rattles around in the fluid inside the skull, and that's where you end up killing your brain cells. The head guards weren't really to protect the brain; they were more to protect the face, and obviously to stop you from getting completely knocked out as well. Although people get knocked out with head guards now.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, I think certain fighters are beyond the point of no return, and I think Derek, unfortunately, is probably one of them. But I hope I'm wrong. For Christ, I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I think we all do. I think we all kind of hope Chisora in 10, 15, 20 years' time is still sounding as normal and still able to live life to the best of his ability. I hope so. I really do. Because Chisora as a character we like. Yeah,
you saw him walk into the ring in his splendorous Barbie attire, with his two daughters. Well, let's hope that by the time they're teenagers or they're young women and they've maybe got married and had kids of their own, let's hope he can still appreciate them. Because, there ain't no substitute for your health. Doesn't matter how many millions you got in the bank.
As I say, your health is your wealth. That's the truest saying.
True, absolutely true.
In terms of everything else, so we touched on a lot of things now today. In terms of 2023 as a whole, where it's been a quick year, But how have you been satisfied with this year so far as a whole of boxing? Because a lot of people like say about boxing, oh, it's this and it's terrible. This year has been pretty good so far. We still have 4 months left.
No, it's not terrible. Some people are just spoiled, I think. First of all, the amount of boxing that's on that you've got access to every week is incredible.
This week there's 2 cards on Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. It's Dennis McCann and Baluta, isn't it? It was one
Baluta,
of them on Friday.
Yeah. The next gen show, Gamalia fight. Saturday, Birmingham.
I mean, this is, and that's a slow week. So back in the day, I mean, before satellite TV existed, you were lucky, you get World of Sport or Grandstand and one of them. And on Saturday afternoon, I used to watch a little bit of boxing if it was on with my grandfather. That was our lot, and that was recorded, and it was usually domestic level as well. So, first of all, people are spoiled as far as the amount of boxing that's on. Secondly, if you think that boxing is dead in terms of talent, you ain't got no idea about the history of the sport. There's lots of talent. And Christ Almighty, a couple of weeks ago we saw 2 absolute masters of the game, Inoue and Crawford, beating up very good opposition. Like there was no tomorrow, and that's just 2 guys. It's two, probably the 2 best in the world. Usyk as well. So, okay, there are fights that don't get made. There are people ducking other people, but that's always existed. It's always existed. You go back to when, just as an example, Floyd Patterson had the title. I mean, he sat on it for a couple of years. Customata wouldn't let him go anywhere near Sonny Liston, and we know why, because when he did get in the ring, he got flattened. But it's not no. Nothing is new. Nothing is new. You just got to look for the positives, appreciate the positives. If you're a real boxing fan, there's plenty to enjoy out there. There really is. And I think 2023 has been all right.
I think it's been fantastic.
Good fights. Well, I mean, the one I just mentioned earlier. Navarrete and Valdez. Go and have a look at that one. That got overshadowed by the whole Joshua thing. But go and have a look at it. There was a little 6-rounder on the undercard of Joshua and Hellenius. I mean, I know it's only a 6-rounder, but
George Lillard or something. His name was
George Lillard. Yeah, it's brilliant. If you look for this stuff and you're a boxing fan and you're not into the cult of personality, you find things you'll enjoy. There's plenty to enjoy.
I think it's been a great year for boxing this year, and I think that, as I said, we still have a couple of months left to go. There's fights being announced for November, October. We still have December, so I think there's still plenty to keep us fans going.
Oh yeah. We're not even through 2/3 of the year, are we? There's a lot of good stuff to come. There's whether you're talking domestic level. I mean, we've got that card, the Baluta card on Friday. That could turn out that fight with Dennis McCann could turn out to be a brilliant fight. Oh, there's Gman frozen up. This always happens. Gman, where you gone? Let's have a look at the chat, see what you guys have got to say in the chat. Bear with me. Bear with me, fellas. I'm going to try and get this up. Read some of your comments if I can. Oh, hello. Is someone coming in? Oh, he's coming in.
Apologies about that.
That's all right.
My bad. That was 100% my bad. That was 100% my bad. I knew I always have a spare. So I have the spare iPhone, which is the good iPhone, is what I call it, which never has any lag issues. And I completely forgot to use it. I plugged the dodgy one in, completely forgetting, because that was the one I had charged. And it's only when we went live, I was like, damn, I know what's going to happen. I was like, crap, I know what's going to happen.
And it happened.
But we were talking about just the year as a whole. We still have loads. There's been good work this year, and I personally think there's going to be plenty more. I think that there's drama to come in a lot of different areas this year. A lot, not just in the ring. I think that we are probably not even at the tip of the iceberg for some of the news we're going to be getting.
We've got. I mean, one thing that's kind of intriguing, I think a lot of people are sort of sleeping on it, is the rematch between Eubank and Liam Smith.
which is actually coming up. We're actually just thinking about it, right? We have a really, really good next couple of weeks. So we've 2 fights this weekend. Yeah, they're not the highest level, but they're still good fights.
Yeah.
Then we have the Usyk fight next week, and then we're following that straight into Liam Smith versus Chris Eubank Jr.
Yeah.
I mean, can't complain.
Again, some people are just spoiled. They want Crawford Spence every weekend. You ain't going to get that. But you will get entertainment if you look for it.
It's a rarity we get them. Like it's a rarity. It's a once a year type of fight. Maybe you get 2 of them a year. Like this year, we've been lucky. We've had a couple. We've had the Tank versus Garcia. We're getting Canelo Charlo. We got Crawford Spence and Uwe Fulton. We might only get 2 of them next year.
Well, I couldn't. That week, Inoue and Spence in the same, and Crawford. That was an incredible week. And I mean, I was trying to think of when you had 2 performances like that in the same week. I can't remember the last time.
No, I mean that was literally 2 people really wanting to stake their claim for the best of boxing, and they both did it. And it's funny because you look at Fulton and Inoue and you think, how do you top that? And then Crawford goes and does it. It's like,
it blows your mind. It does. It's fantastic. But like I was saying when you froze up there, I was saying about if you take Friday's fight, McCann and Baluta, that could end up being fight of the year, domestic fight of the year. You just don't know, because that's a really good matchup.
Well, Baluta's last fight was tremendous. That was only back in March.
Yes, that's right. And the rematch, like I said, with Eubank and Smith, I think people overlook the fact that in the first few rounds, Eubank wasn't out of it at all. It's not like Smith totally dominated. In fact, even in the 4th round, before he got knocked out, was it towards the end of the 3rd round he was actually teeing off on Smith?
3rd round, you were getting the impression that the right was not on the wall, but the fight was shifting in Eubank's favour.
Yeah.
And then boom, it just changed.
Yeah. So it's possible he could turn it around. I picked Smith to win in the first fight, and I'll pick him again to win. I didn't think he'd knock him out in 4 rounds, but
that was a great pick.
Yeah. Do you know, I know someone who picked Smith to win in the 4th round.
Did he bet on it?
I don't know. I don't think he did. Which more for him.
But he said,
bloke I work with, he said, because he knows a few fighters, and Sam Eggington was talking to him, and Sam said he sparred Smith, and he said Smith hits hard. He said, and he's going to do Eubank. And Andy, my mate, said, I think he'll do him in the 4th round. And I was like, 4th round? Come on.
You wish you bet on someone then. Imagine doing that and then not betting on him. Think how much you would have got. You would have come home with. You would have been like, you would have lived on that for weeks.
I know. I always remember when I was. This is going back. What was it? Which fight was it now? It was the first Eubank Nigel Benn fight. Chris Eubank Senior Nigel Benn fight, and I had $5 in my pocket, and I thought, I think Eubank will stop him in 9 rounds, which he did. I thought, should I put it on? I thought, it won't come in. So I went and got something to eat. And the odds were like, 15-1 or something. It's like my last $5.
And in the 90s,
yeah.
$5 is like 20, 30 quid nowadays. You would have made a nice bit off that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but these things happen.
Man, you do think that. You do just look at odds and think that's a tempted odd, and then you just kick yourself for not doing it. It's happened to me a few times. It's happened to me a fair few times.
That's why we love boxing, because if we all knew, what the results were going to be,
we'd be millionaires.
We'd all be riding around in Bentleys and living in mansions. But that's why we love the game, because sometimes it really surprises you. That's why I wouldn't rule out Dubois entirely. I mean, I think Usyk will win. But
a lifetime of upsets, nothing surprises you.
No. And don't forget a lifetime of bad decisions as well. So there's always that possibility.
True that. Well, we've seen, I think this year has been kind of like we've seen a lot of them. Well, this year and last year as well, we've seen that come in an awful lot, unfortunately. Hopefully we don't see anything like that. And the guy who does win will deserve to win if it goes to points. I think we will.
Yeah. I mean, I can't see, there being any controversy with the Usyk Dubois fight, but Eubank Smith as an example, you never know.
Yeah. you just don't. And a lot of people could turn around and say, well, maybe they'd want Eubank to win because it sets the Conor Benn fight up. He's coming off the back of a win. So you never know.
Well, I mean, the world runs on conspiracy theories now, doesn't it? Now,
let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, haven't seen how the first fight went. I wouldn't be shocked if we see a stoppage again because I don't have the greatest faith in Eubank after what I saw last January.
Well, at 160, also boiled himself down to 159 or whatever it was for the aborted Benn fight, and then taking that Smith fight so quickly afterwards.
That was just mind-numbing. I can't. Of course he wasn't. Of course his chin wasn't the best. I mean, God knows, he probably hadn't recovered from the first weight cut.
Well, you can wreck your body as well by doing that, by boiling yourself down. I always think of Roy Jones going up to heavyweight and then coming down to fight Tarver back at light heavy, and his body was shot after that.
That's why I always hate looking at that fight. Even though I feel Roy Jones won it fairly, it's always like that's the beginning of the end of probably one of the best fighters you'll ever see in his prime.
Yeah. Although he failed a test, didn't he, as well? At one point.
Richard Hall. They both failed that fight.
I think so, yeah.
So it was fair, to be fair. It was even. And Roy Jones still absolutely walked that fight.
All we need now is for
performances.
All we need now is for Lena Dartu to say she failed a test as well, and then her and Baumgardner in the same boat.
You can just be like, okay, fair enough. But we do no contest. Like, nah. What's the point? That is the sport, and that is what we have on this Wednesday night. So, mate, we've gone nearly an hour, right? And I like getting these in the kind of 50-minute mark. But before we go, right? Obviously, I'm going to leave it down to you. And by the way, I want to just check because we're not quite there yet. So, by the way, everyone can see in the chat. I have Joe Stunner's channel pinned in the chat. If you could go over there because we desperately want to get Joe to 2K subs, don't we? 2K subs. His link to his channel is pinned in the chat, right? And I'm going to pin it in the comment section after this just to make sure. But please, let's try and get Joe 2K subs. There's 200 basically of you guys in the building. There's bound to be at least 10 of you guys that aren't subbed to Joe Stunner. So at least, come on, hop over. I'm going to leave the floor to you to talk us out. But any thoughts you want to add to the end of this, or even just plug the channel? The floor is on to you.
No, any added subs, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I always love doing the videos, but wouldn't bother if people weren't watching them and commenting. What do I think about boxing? I think it's in a good place. I think it's the sport we all love. I do think the PED thing is an issue, but like I said before, we're catching them, or some of them. And as long as we don't roll over and just not do anything, I think we'll get them. Sport's in good shape. Sport is in good shape. There's always been problems with it, whether it's the mob being involved and fixed fights and all the rest of it. There's always been issues. It's always been the black sheep of sports, but it's a great sport. And like you said, we've had some great fights so far this year, some great events, and we're not even 2/3 of the way through the year. I think this is a good year for boxing.
You said something there, the black sheep of sports. That is boxing in a nutshell. Because you go back to the early 1900s, you could do more time in prison, as Jack Johnson and Joe Chawinski found out, having a boxing match than you could for murder back then. As they both found out in their fight back in 1901, I think that was when they had their fight.
Right. I'm trying to remember this. I know Johnson spent time in prison. What was that? What was specifically wrong with that fight? Was it a fix?
The first time they spent 30 days in prison for a fight, and then the second time was when he violated the Mann Act, which was an absurd act.
I know that, yeah. They just had the fight and they got 30 days. Jesus.
They had the fight, they got 30 days. And if you watch the documentary about Johnson, apparently that was longer than someone got for murdering their wife at the time. Yeah. They got longer for a boxing match, Joe Chawinski and Jack Johnson, than someone for murder back then. Wow. Madness.
Yeah.
Absolute madness. That is some of the history of the sport.
Insanity isn't just a modern thing.
No.
Well, we think the world is currently mad, but it's not.
We think it is, and then you hear stories like that, and you think,
yeah,
it's like we never move forward in time.
Yeah, yeah.
But lads, I've enjoyed this. I really did,
yeah,
and definitely we need to get. I love getting some good guests on, having a good chat with. There's still 180 views in the building. If you haven't smashed the like button, and if you haven't, Joe Stunner Boxing, watch it. You will not be disappointed. Let's see him hit 2K. I imagine we're going to hear from you now in your own video about the Elisa Baumgardner situation. I imagine that's coming.
Yeah,
so we'll stay tuned for that 100%.
I'll have to do a little read up on it because, like I say, I didn't know it. You mentioned beforehand, I've got some news. I'm thinking, she hasn't failed a PED test, has she? Yes, she has.
There we go.
Yeah.
But lads, we will wait patiently for Joe Stunner's video on this bit more detail than we could give here, because it was just a case of I'm going to read this real quick and say this is the situation. I will hear about it then. But lads, I hope you all enjoyed it. Smash the like button. Joe Stunner Boxing. Thanks again for joining me. Lads, peace out.
Bye-bye.